show these at many of his lectures. Also, Jim Moseley used to show them.
I have to say, what impresses me about this piece of footage is we have movement that is almost insect-like. It defies all conventional laws of normal flight. And if this were a fabrication, let's say there's a stick, a string, and a plate, if you stopped, you'd see the movement of the plate. It would swing out.
Because that's the alternative theory, that it was taken from a car, from a fish cane, you know, a little model hanging. And that's why it's moving so jerkily. At least that's what some people have said.
Yeah, but for me, this one really has impressed me. And again, that movement that is so organic, that would absolutely flatten a conventional pilot against the wall or turn him to pudding, we see here, and covering fairly good expanses of the horizon. Okay, we're coming out of the 50s, I think.
Yeah, I think we're moving to the 60s now.
Back to our favorite planet here.
60s was a very, very active time for UFOs. There were many worldwide flaps. In the United States, the controversy reached such proportion that even the government had to commit the University of Colorado to do a study.
Yeah, 69.
It was released in 69. Blue Book continued till 1969, so still we will see many more Blue Book films.
Now this is footage that is indicative of a certain type of UFO we'll be seeing on and off over the decades, one that I find fascinating, because when you slow it down...
They go very fast,
you see the movement that you'd associate with an inchworm. It's small, it's large, it's small, it's large. It's like a dash and a dot, which doesn't seem normal in terms of any flight characteristics of helicopters, airplanes, rockets, missiles, you name it. And Mike's footage here is terrific in that some of it will be slowed down in sequence, whether or not it's on Earth or some of our space shots later on.
Yeah, this is a very interesting one
Monument
too.
Valley.
It goes very, very fast.
So we're going to see it progressively slowed, and once again you'll see that classic inchworm movement. Which
they had to slow it down because otherwise you can hardly see anything. And there were some studies done about the estimate of the speed, although I don't remember the technical details right now, but this has been looked by various people, and it's considered definitely genuine.
I think it's terrific footage.
Daniel Fry, though, he's certainly controversial.
He's also in the contactee movement as such.
His claim to fame is that he was an engineer at White Sands.
Yes.
And that he took a trip to New York City in half an hour on a saucer, and then he wrote the famous book, Incident at White Sands.
Right, I remember that one. That's somewhere in both of our libraries.
Now, this one is alleged to be part of the, almost like a program landing. This according to a researcher and TV producer called Bob Emenegger at the Holloman Air Force Base. Yeah. There's quite a bit of controversy. Because in the Emenegger movie, it's presented as a kind of a scenario. But later the story was that at least part of the footage is real. Though we don't know for sure because it hasn't been authenticated by the Air Force.
Exactly, and you can bet the Air Force is not going to authenticate a lot of the footage.
But they had promised it to Emenegger. That was the story, that they had promised him the footage. And then they didn't give it to him, but then apparently they gave him a little bit. And, well, here we are again with Fry, and I have to say that I'm skeptical about this. I cannot hide it.
Yeah, I mean, you keep coming up against quandaries, and I think human psychology, when you look at this stuff, dictates that that's just too good to be true.
Yeah.
Okay, the little ones, the little white dots, they're fine, but again,
it does look like a model.
If we weren't there, we weren't there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is definitely one that is, well, the chips are...
Though the book is interesting, the book by
He's a
Fry,
good writer, extremely sincere.
And it comes across sincere.
And that's one of the things that marks a lot of the folks in the contactee movement.
I know.
A tremendous sincerity, as human beings, no scandal, that kind of thing.
They come across sincere, but then some of the tales are very wild. Very wild.
But again, I think a lot of our current day abductees, an area that you have a lot of knowledge in and that I've certainly specialized in part over the years, you hear extraordinary things from, in many cases, decent, ordinary people. Now,
here we're back with Adamski. And this, of course, is the most famous of the Adamski films, taken by Madeline Rutherford. but she was, I guess, Adamski was next to her in Silver Spring.
Maryland, yeah.
Right. And then later we will see a close-up. Again, a very, very controversial piece of footage. Yeah. Though some people, like our late dear friend Coleman von Kavinsky,
a tremendous researcher who was really a mentor for both Antonio
and who knew a lot about photography and film, he did accept this film as real.
It's funny, too, in the international field of UFO studies, you have many, many well-educated people who take the subject seriously, who devote years to researching them. And one of the great divides is between a lot of American researchers and our European brothers and sisters, characterized in part by the split over Adamski and the contactees, where Americans tend to be more skeptical of the contactee movement, and Europeans, for whatever reasons, tend to take it more seriously.
Well, I'm not so sure. I mean, what happens in Europe, there's a whole school of ufology called psychosociological. There, they take it seriously, but only from a sociological point of view. It's not that they believe
more Jungian,
literally in it. Yeah. Although some do, obviously. This is actually the one by Rutherford.
Certainly one of the most controversial bits of footage ever shot on this subject.
The movement is, I do have some problems with it, but it's as classic as you can get.
And again, many of our colleagues take this as absolutely as authentic as anything we're going to see.
Adamski is very popular still in many parts of the world, for instance in Japan. In Japan there's still like 3 Adamski groups, and they treat him like the Bible. Now we get into the NASA footages, and we will be seeing, of course, into all the way to the late 90s.
This is very exciting for me, I must say. Any of you listeners who grew up in the early days of the Apollo program, when we looked at astronauts as heroes, and when we first started to get our first footage from space, as you might imagine, certain anomalies were captured on film.
McDivitt, that was the first probably well-known so-called astronaut UFO sighting.
Yes.
He also took some photographs which are very well-known, and they were never really accepted as real UFOs by NASA, but that's to be expected, probably.
Course. Yeah, that was also continuing public relations problem for NASA.
As we will talk later on, some astronauts, notably Gordon Cooper, have gone public quite courageously.
Yeah.
Now we're in England. Oh yes, the
very quick sequence. There it goes.
Taken from an airliner, the Oldfield. This is a 16 millimeter movie. And
here's one of our favorites. C. Hansen, U.S. Navy photographer out on Catalina Island, 26 miles off the coast of California, captured this extraordinary image.
Yeah, also 16 millimeter film.
Yeah, and it is moving on a straight horizontal. Look at that shape. That is your classic ellipse. It's not being subjected by wind. It does not seem in any way to be a balloon or a lighter-than-air object.
There was one interpretation that it was an aircraft, though it doesn't look to me like an aircraft.
On those close-ups, I have to say, this is, for me, a terrific capture of an unidentified... Fred Steckling.